you look at a player like that with how well she played this year and you think, wow, that player still has a lot to give. Why would they be walking away? But also with what I know about Alyssa Naeher, I'm not surprised at all that she really thought about it in terms of, like I said, the program, not just her. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special Saturday edition of The Late Sub. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday in the States. We took a couple of days off to make it to the weekend because we did have a big weekend game to talk about. We thought we'd just do it right away, right after final whistle. Of course, we needed to discuss the United States friendly against England, 80,000 plus at Wembley Stadium. Big deal. People always remember that game 2 years ago and how it kind of set these two teams on two different trajectories short term, but then also some of the connections made for the United States in this game 2 years ago set them up for that Olympic glory this year. This has always been a really good test between two really good teams that actually like to play in similar ways. They match up well physically against one another. Always a really, really great test. Always a little bit of edge to it. You know, there was the United States defeating England in the 2019 semifinal, which I think always kind of set this off as one of the nice rivalries in international football on the women's side. And so maybe we go into this. It's Emma Hayes' return to England. I think that she wanted to put on a good showing in front of, you know, her country people, and the fact that she's playing against some of her Chelsea players, and just this nice kind of full circle moment after the United States did so well at the 2024 Olympics and England did so well at the 2023 World Cup. And yet, this game was mostly played without a ton of shots on goal. It was a little bit of a snoozer, 0-0 between England and the United States. Maybe not what people expected, but also once you see it play out, you think to yourself, maybe we shouldn't have expected anything differently just because of the personnel and the tactics and sort of where both of these teams are. But before we get into the game, which we'll get into that in detail as much as you can for a 0-0 draw in an international friendly where it's kind of made up and the points don't matter, because I did want to talk about some of the stuff that came out from the United States before this game, because after, again, the last time we recorded this podcast, Alyssa Naeher, the number one, the starting goalkeeper for the U.S. Women's National Team, announced late last week that this international period will be her last with the U.S. She will finish her tenure as the U.S. Women's National Team first goalkeeper at the end of 2024. It was her decision. She said she reflected on it a lot. Obviously, she got that final thing that she had never won before in Olympic gold this summer, and she felt like it was time, and this is a very Naeher statement to make, but felt like it was time to maybe help the coaching staff open up this player pool and find out who this next heir is before it's crunch time in 2027, right? Very Naeher approach, I think, is what everyone expected. You always know that a player like that is going to have the interests of the program in mind, including her own. She's only 36 years old, but she is like, I'll be 38, 39 once we make it to the World Cup or to the next Olympics, and it just didn't feel right for her to stay. And I think she also just felt like after the Olympics, she felt very at peace with what she had given to the program, and I think she's ready for the next chapter in her life. She does have a 1-year deal with Chicago next year. Maybe that's the end, maybe it's not. We're not entirely sure, but this both did and did not surprise me. I think you look at a player like that with how well she played this year and you think, wow, that player still has a lot to give. Why would they be walking away? But also with what I know about Alyssa Naeher, I'm not surprised at all that she really thought about it in terms of, like I said, the program, not just her. And thinking, the U.S., this has been something that everybody knows, and I think the team knows, which is that they do need to figure out who the heir is to Naeher. Naeher was in that system. She played or was part of the team for a World Cup before she got that starting role, right? She was third string in 2015, and then by 2019, she was ready to step into that larger number one role. They need that now. Is it Casey Murphy? I don't know. Is it a player like, they have Mandy Hott, who is sort of that player that's playing so well in NWSL, which was what sprung, Naeher to have the role that she had with the United States before taking over the number one role. Obviously, Fallon Tullis-Joyce is in this camp, another young player who has been playing really well. There's a wealth of talent in the United States at the goalkeeper position, but they've never done a particularly good job of fostering a pool, which in some ways I understand, because you need to know who your number one is and stick with that person. And they've been very lucky that, you go back to Hope Solo, you know exactly who the number one is, right? Or then you have Alyssa Naeher and you say, well, if she keeps putting these performances for country, then why would you worry too much about who's going to come after her? So I thought this move was sad in that I think everyone's going to miss Uncle Naeher very much. I think you can go back to some of her biggest performances. I mean, I think the performance I'll probably remember here at the end is, of course, she played very well in the Olympics, but that game against Sweden in the round of 16 of the 2023 World Cup, where she did everything she possibly could to get them through after the team really, really struggled and the team needed individuals to step up. Naeher again, as we know, by a millimeter, did everything she possibly could. And how in that year and then the year that followed, she got more and more comfortable taking penalty kicks and just becoming. There's this beautiful thing that happens when a player of Naeher's stature gets a little bit older, which is that you start to see just this great intersection of mind and body, where she still was physically able to play the goalkeeping position to the best of her ability, but she also, with every year that passed, she became more experienced. She learned more things. She added more things to her her arsenal, to her oeuvre, you might say. And you saw that in last year and this year, where this player who was utterly in control, utterly comfortable between the sticks for the United States, and just taking that to the next level was incredible. And it was a leadership point that not only the U.S. very much needed in that time, but I think will be very much missed. Is she really was the veteran anchor, I think, of that team in 2024 in Paris. You saw that with the way she interacted with her younger teammates. You saw it with the way she's opened up with the media more. I'm based in Chicago. I have covered Alyssa Naeher here for many years, and she's always one of the most thoughtful interviews you'll ever get. She has a lot of really interesting ideas, both about being a leader, but also tactical ideas. She's an incredibly smart player, and it's been really fabulous to see her open up more and more and more as she becomes more comfortable again with her role, not only as the United States number one, but just as a leader on that team. And I think for years to come, she's always going to be a really interesting chat, because she thinks very deeply about the game of soccer. She takes very seriously her relationships with other people. And I think you can see that. And this maybe takes us to this game here in England, which I think was possibly her last. It's possible that maybe she gets the start against the Netherlands and then gets a send-off, but I think maybe the whole idea of this European trip is that they're not doing that, or there is no great, wave to the crowd. I would like to think that they'll give her a non-playing send-off game next year, like they did with a number of wonderful stars this year. But if this was it, then it was just a really classic Naeher performance. She wasn't tested much, but she stepped up when she was, and you saw just the relationships that she's built with that back four, which was Casey Kruger, Naomi Girma, Emily Sonnet, and Emily Fox, and just how comfortable they were, how good she played. I mean, you think about the connection that Naeher made on the pitch with Girma and just how good they were together, or her comfort level with Kruger, who she played with for club for a number of years, or a player like Sonnet, who has been in training, but her starting roles have kind of been sporadic. Like, Naeher was always so good at getting everyone on the same page, an incredibly vocal leader from the back. And she saw numerous greats in front of her, right? The tandem of Naeher and Sauerbrunn, right? Or she even had before that, other players, other greats that went through the United States organization, but always really good. I mean, I think that's always been the question when you do talk about the heir to Alyssa Naeher, is who's going to talk like that, right? Who's going to get the team organized? Who's going to stay calm? Who's going to call for the ball correctly? Who's going to make the defense comfortable so that they can turn out, so that they can drop back? All of these different things that an international side needs to be able to do on short training schedules. And the U.S. goes into a brand new era. But I feel very bolstered. We always talk about how much we admire these women, and I think Alyssa Naeher is just yet another incredible player that we're saying goodbye to on the international stage this year. But the way that, again, that she went program first was so her. It was very Uncle Naeher to say, nope, I'm done. You might want to hold on to me a little bit too long, but I'm not going to let you. And this game played out, I think, again, just very fitting that if this was her last time as the number one for the U.S. women's national team, it ended in a clean sheet. But now let's talk about what happened in front of Naeher, because that was a little bit more, I don't know, nebulous, trepidatious, back and forth, some good, some bad. So like I said, I'll run through the entire starting 11 now of who played against England. I know I mentioned the defense, but it was Naeher in goal, Kruger, Girma, Sonnet, and Fox in the back line. It was the full starting senior team midfield of Sam Coffey, Rose Lavelle, and Lindsey Horan. And then sort of that mixture, we knew based on the roster selection that there were going to be some young players getting into this game. There was going to be a little bit of maybe some improvising happening when it comes to roles and to where people are playing on the pitch. And so what Emma Hayes went with in the front three was Alyssa Thompson on the left, Lynn Williams in the middle, and Emma Sears on the right. Bright start for the United States. I mean, I think a theme of this is that the U.S. should feel very good about how they were generally in control for the entirety of this game. It got end to end a little bit. You saw moments of momentum at maybe the end of the first half for England, or after there was a called off handball, which was kind of a silly referee intervention that sort of weirdly swung momentum back in England's favor after it was shown to not be a handball in the box against England. And so what did we see? What do we expect? And what should they take into the Netherlands game? I will say in retrospect, and this is just sort of the human side of the game, I am not super surprised that Emma Hayes didn't go super crazy with experimentation in this one. First of all, because with the travel, with training, you probably want to put your most experienced players out in the first game of a European swing like this, get the younger, less experienced players a lot more time just to get, used to the cadence of how this week is going to go. I think there's also an element of Hayes, and I really get this, probably just not wanting to go too crazy or experiment too much. She's playing in Wembley against over 80,000, mostly English fans. It's her trip back to England after leaving the Chelsea gig. I just think that it makes sense that she's like, I just don't think the team should lose this game. No matter what, let's go in with a basis of some veteran leadership who can stay calm under pressure. We know that England likes to press at times. We know that England likes to move the ball quickly. They like to utilize their wings. Let's be steady here in the defense and the midfield, and then see what we can do, right? When we do all, hit on our own pressing triangles, or if we do, they utilize the wings a lot, sometimes to their detriment a little bit in this game. And so I get it. Is it like the big rampant experimentation that we're eventually hopeful for? No. I mean, I think next year's January camp and the She Believes Cup will be a very good opportunity for that. They're probably always going to be a little bit more experimental at home than away from home, just sort of the strength of their home record and how comfortable they are in front of American crowds. I also think I had this thought a lot watching this game, which is just that like the U.S. is in this in-between space of like they want to keep everybody healthy. They want to keep rewarding some of those great performers from the Olympics. They want to have that leadership structure. Again, you're losing a player like Alyssa Naeher. How do you keep those leadership structures intact, right? But you also just like, they don't have to figure things out right away. Their next major international competition, and it's even, sub-major, is they have to do World Cup qualifying in 2026. But they have so much time before that. And I think they have no idea what this team's going to look like once they reach that period. They are not in a ramp up at all, right? And so, yes, you want to go out, you want to do a good showing, you want to implement maybe the things that won you an Olympic gold medal. Hayes probably just really didn't want to get blown out of the water, which I completely understand. And that's how you end up with a 0-0 draw, right? It was pretty cagey on both sides. I thought some of the really, we saw Alyssa Thompson again. This is where I really like where she's at with the U.S. right now, with a lot of time to grow into her role on the wing. She was taking on Lucy Bronze 1v1 in that first half and putting Bronze on her heels. That blistering speed, Bronze really struggled with it. On the flip side, you can see some of the international inexperience from Alyssa Thompson, which is that she wasn't able to always turn that into clear-cut chances. She does get a shot on goal in the first half, which could have been placed. With the amount of time that she had in the position she had, hopefully you're hopeful for an unsavable shot there. But those opportunities are important. That's why you put these young players out. And again, I think putting the young players out on the front line gives you a chance to, again, not lose the game, but also get some reps for some players who need it. Emma Sears, I thought, had some nice moments. It seems like Sears was really trying not to make any huge mistakes. There was a lot of sort of like angle ball going on the right wing, where if she would be in a 1v1 battle, you could see her kind of thinking like, okay, let's try to get the corner here, or like, let's try to get a throw in. Let's retain possession, right? It seemed like there was a lot of thought of like, how do we retain possession and not get cooked by who do they had? Oh yeah, they had Alex Greenwood on the outside there, right? So I think that you just don't want to get cooked on that side. I think we saw that a lot from Emma Sears. Totally fine. A very valid way to approach a new career with the U.S. Women's National Team, right? Lynn Williams, I thought, did a nice job of holding down the number 9, which we actually saw the U.S. lose a little bit when she got called out of the game. When they make a substitution, they pull Williams out in the second half. I think some of the struggles, there were like a myriad of struggles in the first and in the second half for the U.S., but I think one of the big ones was just that they did not have a solidified idea of how the wings were supposed to relate to the number 9. You saw Emily Fox making some really nice overlapping runs to get service in on the right side. And again, you just didn't necessarily have that right person making the right run or being in the right position from that number 9 role all the time. I think you saw Lindsay Horan covering a lot of ground. We'll talk about the midfield in a second, but you saw Horan and Lavelle getting into more of those dangerous areas as much as any of the forwards were. So just that consistency that they had with that triple espresso, right, with Swanson, Smith, and with Rodman, they just don't have with these players, and that's expected. And so I just wasn't surprised. Like, you're watching the first half of this game and you go, all of the pieces are here. The defense looks relatively comfortable. Naeher looks relatively comfortable. They're moving the ball well. They're utilizing the wings. There's some interplay inside, outside once they get into the box. And then the final shot isn't there, right? And you go, well, that look at this lineup. That makes perfect sense. I think where things started to get a little bit frustrating is in the second half, where you did have some of those veteran midfielders get into interesting locations in England's penalty area and still not be able to make those shots. This was another game where you're watching Lindsay Horan do too much, and you wonder if she just needs to settle into a singular position a little bit more. She was not the true number 10, right? That was Rose Lavelle. You saw them in the same areas a lot of the time. There was that breakaway where Lavelle defers to Horan to try to knock the ball in, and Lavelle was onside and Horan was not, so that goal gets called back. You saw Horan coming back into the defense to try to help the defense out, but the spacing wasn't right, so it would feel like, you've got a defender who is kind of handling things in terms of where they want to be in space, and then suddenly Lindsey Horan is there, and she's trying to get the ball too, and it messes up, and then suddenly maybe an English attacker is bypassing 2 U.S. players rather than 1 because Horan is canceling out the other defender. It didn't feel great from Lindsey Horan today. And I think it's one of those games where she's trying to do everything and nothing at the same time. She's trying to be a target 9 and be a number 6 and help wide and all of these different things. And I think, as we know with Horan, with sort of the mentality of the way that she plays, the longer they go without scoring, sometimes that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so just another question mark of what does the U.S. want from the number 8 role? What do they want from the number 6, from the number 10? When you have a player who is ostensibly sort of trying to fill the gaps too much and go too far in too many directions where they're almost disrupting play as much as they're aiding it, you do have to place some of that on the player, but some of that you also have to place on the coaching staff, where this is the dream of Lily Johannes, who did not play in this game, of that they'll just have a clear midfield structure again. Thought Sam Coffey played well, thought Rose Lavelle played well, but it still just felt like the midfield was not on the same page. And I think sometimes when you watch players do that, you definitely can say, Lindsey Horan has been playing too many years with this team to get kind of caught by her impulses too much in a match like this one. But I also think you can say, well, if she was getting clearer instruction, what we know from Lindsey Horan, if she was getting clearer instruction, she would look a little bit different, right? We've seen her play tag team on the back of a defense, right? We've seen her push forward onto the forward line when asked. Have a clear-cut structure for what you want for the number 8. If Rose Lavelle is on the pitch, tell Horan not to crowd her, and then I think you're going to see more success. But also, again, this match was mostly played out on the wings. It was not a lot of progression through the middle of the pitch, or if it was just mostly through dribbling. But I was just very impressed with I will say, with how the back line and how Coffey handled pressure coming from the England attack. And then in the second half, you see some substitutes, right? They get Corbin Albert, Jaden Shaw, Ali Sentner gets her first cap. Very good for her. Yasmin Ryan comes in. I thought Ryan was very active, but again, struggling with that clinical nature that I do think is just a little bit harder on the international level. I mean, that's maybe my takeaway from Ryan kind of holistically in her time with the United States so far, is just she's good at all the little things. She's playing a lot of great team defense. She's moving into the right spaces to get outlet passes. And she's just that final piece of scoring at the international level is really hard. And there's a reason why only certain people are able to do it. It is something you can learn. That's why they get this experience. But that was kind of the takeaway. And then again, when Williams comes off and they move Yasmin Ryan in closer centrally and Jaden Shaw is out on the wing, they lose the forward structure, which is why you saw most of the chances coming from the midfield, and the midfield wasn't on the same page for who needs to be taking those shots rather than deferring to one another. At the end of the game, the U.S. press is really giving England fits. Like I said, the U.S. should feel very good about the way that they controlled this game. The press was fairly easy. I would say like the England press was fairly easy for them to unlock, and their press was very effective against England's back line. I did actually walk away from this game a little bit concerned for England. I know they are also missing players, and I know that there are many pundits who will do a better job of analyzing them than I could, but the way that they kind of collapsed in the second half of this game when facing kind of a basic sub and press situation from the United States, I think would be a little bit concerning going into a major tournament in 2025. They only made 2 subs in this whole game. It looked like they were getting tired. I mean, you saw like Chloe Kelly, ram Casey Kruger at the end of this game for no reason. And then actually I kind of, stopped the violence, but I did laugh a little bit when Kruger kind of got a lick back right before full-time whistle. I just don't understand where they're at mentally. And again, I know that they are missing some impact players, but when you are seeing some of these same players that have been with the team for years and years and years, and it seems like they're not able to kind of physically contend with some of the basic pressing structures of the game, it reminds me a little bit of Vlatko Andonovski's U.S. women's national team. So what does that say, right? But again, there are others that should be doing more analysis on that than me. So the U.S. loses its attacking structure. I don't think they register a single shot on target in the second half, but they feel fine. They're holding things in the wings a lot. They do the thing at the end of the game, which I really don't like, which is that they start sending lofting crosses in the air. I don't think that's a high efficiency way to score in the late second half against good competition, but it's also fine. I mean, that's kind of the moral of the story here, is it kind of, fizzles out to a 0-0 draw. Hayes does not lose. They get a good showing. It was a much sturdier showing. Again, that game, that 2-1 loss that they had in late 2022 was really exciting, but they had such holes in what they were doing that you saw it in that second friendly against Spain, and then ultimately in the World Cup, which is just that like the midfield was a huge problem. The midfield was better against England in this game than they were. And I know I keep saying it. I know that England are missing impact players that they were not missing in 2022, but Sam Coffey looked really comfortable, which I think is a great sign for her role in her position and how she can be utilized by the U.S. going forward, even as they continue to sort of work people into that defensive midfield structure. I thought that while Horan and Lavelle weren't always on the same page on the attack, they did at least get the ball. The turnover generation in the midfield was very good, and there were no huge defensive breakdowns, which again I think is really impressive. And we did not see that 2 years ago, where you saw the midfield getting completely bypassed, and there was sort of this onslaught of end-to-end action, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So, what did the U.S. take away from this? That they maybe need to really think about what they're doing in the midfield. I would say my greatest concern at this moment from Hayes, who has always been very good at turnover. She did it in the attack, and that won them in a gold medal this summer. Naeher is kind of forcing the issue at goalkeeper, but the midfield stays pretty static. And I did not anticipate her making a lot of changes this game, but this will look worse in retrospect if they don't start kind of moving forward in that direction and getting the clear, exactly like I said before, the roles that they should be playing in the midfield. It's not always just personnel. It's how do you want them to play? And Hayes did come in talking a big game about the stylish football she wants the United States to be able to play. Maybe that means overlapping runs on the wings. Maybe so. I think that's great. We saw that a lot in the NWSL this year. That just might be where the women's game is at right now. There's a lot of very wide attacking football. But I also am like, well, let's get some different looks in there. Let's change the concept of what we think the number 8 can be. And I think that you can still get that very solid, sturdy turnover generation in the midfield while also being a lot sharper in the attack. For England, I don't know. They've got a major tournament next year. They're coming up on having to figure out the roster for that. They have a lot of veteran leadership in this group, and sometimes you wonder if it's maybe too much. Where have we seen that before? That's also very hard to do after a run of success. Success is a real double-edged sword. Sometimes it's the failures that actually make you, re-look at things and change the way that you're approaching a roster, you're approaching a program. I'm very excited for the Euros. I love not having a horse in a race and just kind of seeing how people are playing. But, good game. I think successful. You send Naeher off into the sunset with a clean sheet. You clearly kind of see some of the pros and the cons that you saw from Thompson and Sears, which I would say perfectly showed up for themselves in this game, and you saw where they have room to grow. Great tape for them. For Lindsey Horan, the tape is getting a little repetitive, which I think is frustrating for the fan base, and you kind of wonder at what point the coaching staff is going to start to feel the same way. Lovely from the back line. Emily Fox attacking outside back, just really, really gorgeous stuff from her. And yeah, so I think you just walk away with questions for England, but you say to the U.S., look sturdy, everyone stayed healthy, and then you move on to the next. So it was a fun game, but hopeful for a little bit more action against the Netherlands later this week. So this has been a special Saturday edition of The Late Sub. I am your host, Claire Watkins. Shout out to producer extraordinaire Parker Fenton. We'll be back with our usual programming next week, but with the holiday and everything, we wanted to hop on and do a deep dive on, everyone's favorite soccer team in the United States, because there's always good stuff to talk about here. But yeah, next week we'll have more college basketball for y'all. We'll probably have some more U.S. thoughts when they play the Netherlands, and we just keep it going. The PWHL started this weekend. It's just the calendar keeps turning, but it'll be nice to have a little bit of WNBA and NWSL off season to focus on some other stuff, because I love that too. So thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.